And thank you to our esteemed guests for this particular panel, which is going to be focused on what does best of breed coaching look like. And you all have interesting technologies that may contribute to your narrative as we go through this, but we want to focus on the people. And I just want to open up with that question. What does best of breed coaching look like? And let's start with Matthew.
Oh, thanks. There's a hospital pass right there.
I thought you could take it, so that's why I handed it.
No, perfect. So I think best of breed coaching, there's been a stigma in industry for years where coaching happens at a specific time, a specific period, whether it be quarterly, semi-annually or annually. I think best of breed coaching is now just engaging with our employees as and when required, because we can't wait for the elongated period to happen, for the issues to arise. We have to be there to support them all the way through, especially in situations like we face now with COVID. The world's changed, so the way in which people interact changes. And so coaching's had to adopt a new model, which is every interaction really becomes the opportunity for a coaching discussion.
Fantastic. Anthony?
Yeah, I think Matthew said it well there. The only thing that I would add from my perspective is best of breed coaching is, and I'll focus on that sales or from a revenue perspective, it's really helping individuals to come in and grow, develop, get better, improve. And you can't do that if you have a passive manager. So a best of breed coaching is an actual sales coach, not a spreadsheet driven manager. So for me, I think for a lot of people, what we're seeing, and it's not happened fully yet, but there's a definite shift to wanting people that can actually coach and improve people versus just managing to a number.
Great points. What about yourself, Wendy?
Yeah, I would say it comes down to 3 C's. So comprehensive, consistent, and customized. And by that, I mean comprehensive. So the problem obviously with coaching is that it's so time consuming, or historically has been. And that means that leaders may jump on a call and listen to a call, but they could jump on a bad call, so they don't have full visibility into what's actually happening. So hopefully comprehensive, meaning you get a full view of what everyone's doing. And that's obviously where tools like Gong comes in. Secondly, consistent, meaning do not spend all of your time with your underperformers. Are you spending time with your middle performers, or is your time being sucked by the underperformers? And finally, customized, meaning it's not a one size fits all approach. You need to customize it per individual rep.
Fantastic. And when you think about your day-to-day approach, do you, how do you coach your reps? And is there an approach that you take in a specialist way? And maybe you've got an example, Matthew.
Yes, I think from our side, we're lucky. We have obviously the BDR community, we have the sales, the direct sellers, and we have pre-sales. So to Wendy's point, you have to customize it based on the role. I think with us, when we're trying to either penetrate an account from a business development perspective, it's strategizing, coming up with a strategy that they can utilize that makes them feel confident in what they're achieving. So that's a discussion that happens on a frequent basis as you try different things. From a sales perspective, and one that worked recently was, we've been in the middle of contract negotiations with people for quite a long time, and the way in which we're having to engage with our customers, specifically because of COVID, has changed. Historically, you would have been sat around a table in a room and you'd have been able to see people's body language, you've been able to understand how they're reacting to some of the points that you're pushing back on. We don't have that luxury anymore. We have Zoom or automated technology, the video conferencing like we see here, but it's a harder nuance that you have to get used to as a seller. And so sitting with people to try and understand body language, sitting with people to allow them to understand what people are actually saying, that coaching element has allowed people to get through the contracting process quicker. But without that side-by-side interaction, without that frequent communication about it, it wouldn't have happened. And therefore, we'd have waited for us to regress back to the old norm, shall we say, and then we'd have tried to address it again there. But fundamentally, it's that continual adapting to the change in times that allows you to work with them.
I like that point around continual adaptation in terms of ensuring that they improve their competencies, and that leads to the confidence. You can't just have the confidence without coaching that competencies and those key competencies. So that's an interesting example. Anthony?
I think from my perspective, when what we're seeing, and I'm trying not to repeat what Matthew said, but, which is difficult, but really from just an example of the coaching that we're looking at, and just to take a step back from that, clearly a lot of us are going to be focusing on the technology. We're going to focus on the conversation intelligence, but if we take a couple of steps back from that, when we're talking about coaching of an individual, it's not all about the deal coaching or the call coaching. It's also about helping that individual develop. And there's lots of different ways of coaching. And a lot of it is not observing and giving feedback. A lot of it is listening, asking the right questions, and actually engaging with that individual. So doing a lot less of the talking and really helping that individual to self-diagnose, which is always better. And also to make sure we're tapping into the individual, back to the point about being customized. You have to understand what that individual wants, what they're driving for, before you can actually help coach them. So that's how I would come at it from.
Wendy?
Yeah, just to build on what Anthony said there, I think it's very important to have empathy, because you need to choose. Your timing is key. Like, you don't know, is that person really low in confidence? Have they had a really tough quarter? Do they actually just need an arm around their shoulder? And so you choose your moments and think about your timing with comments. And I will say, we did an exercise in my previous firm where we got everyone to print out what were their top 3 motivators, and they had that on the screen in front of them. So whether it was build a house, or to holidays or whatever else, and just bring it back to that sometimes. So remind them, when their confidence is down. I'd also say it's important to be vulnerable, and it should be a two-way street. It's not all you to them. You need to be able to accept from them as well. And I think another example of something I've seen work previously is we did speedback sessions. So we'd go around and every rep would do, like, literally speed dating is 90 seconds. These are 3 things I'd appreciate about you and 1 thing I wish you'd do differently. And the manager was involved with that too. So they didn't feel like it was a one-way street. It was a two-way street, because it's scary saying things to your manager sometimes. And finally, I just say, be direct. Don't use wishy-washy language. It's just be direct and give them 1 or 2 things to work on at a time. And make sure that you overemphasize the positives.
So you used some good examples there of good coaching. Wendy. And I wonder, you shared your story earlier of Goldman Sachs, and I've got no idea what that environment is from a learning and development perspective. So you may have some bad examples from then or in your other time, but wondering, do you have any bad examples or bad coaching experiences that you've seen or you've experienced in your career?
Yeah, so I would say this is definitely not specific to Goldman, but I think the biggest examples I see, or most regular examples I see of this, is people avoiding hard conversations and prioritizing their need to be liked as a manager over actually what's right for the individual. So as a rep, obviously we all want superstar reps. Sometimes people are in the wrong job and you end up at a place where it's performance plan territory. That should never be a surprise. And so for that conversation to be left to a moment where someone is surprised. I once sat in a room, this was not a Goldman, but I once sat in a room with someone who was being fired and literally didn't know he was being fired based on what that person was saying to him, because their language was so vague and they hadn't prepped them ahead of time, and it was horrifying. So I think managers prioritizing their need to be liked over their willingness to have a direct conversation is one of the biggest mistakes I see it made.
What about you, Anthony? Examples of good or bad coaching?
I'll go for the bad, because they're always more interesting and funnier. But I think what we see, and obviously not on Sales Confidence or Pavilion, which are the 2 that I'm connected with, but when you watch webinars outside of those 2, what you see and hear are managers, VPs, etc., who tell stories about coaching, claim to be coaching, but it's their level of credibility is quite shallow. And what I feel is that a lot of those managers who want to coach but maybe don't know how to tend to default back to being almost the deals coming in, so they try and get over involved and they almost try and take the glory or bask in the glory, and then behind the scenes they're taking the glory. So I see that being common. I speak to a lot of AEs, not in my current company obviously, but in other roles. And that is a real issue around AEs not having, it erodes trust, and it erodes that coaching relationship. If you've got somebody who you think is either trying to take your glory or doesn't trust you and is going to do X and Y for you. So I think that's probably the best example that I can think of.
Great. Matthew?
I think just to reinforce what the others have said. So yeah, there's a lot of examples of poor communication that waits for a problem to arise. And the only way you really coach people is by addressing it when you see the challenge, not when it becomes a problem. And too many people wait for that to happen. Too many people wait for the escalation and then address it. And that's just a common theme across most industries. I remember it in one of the tech companies I worked with in the past. They actually sold a software that tried to help address that. And even with technology to support that, people still don't leverage it in the right way.
So thank you for sharing so far. We're moving on to the section now where we can also provide examples where others can take away points or examples of technology that you use or processes or frameworks. So are there tools or processes, or is there a framework that you use in particular that helps you with your own coaching and helps you improve the reps that you work with? We'll go to Anthony first.
Okay, so before I start with the Mind Tickle Ava, I'll promote one of the books that have had a large impact on me from a coaching perspective is Sales Leadership by Keith Rosen. I'm not sure if anyone's aware of that. Maybe I'll post it in the event, a link to it in the event notes. But what that does is take a step back from what I'm mentioning earlier and actually talks about proper coaching, and it gives lots of good examples. So if you're a manager that isn't getting the support from your organization, that reading that book really does provide a lot of pointers. So I'll start there. Obviously, I work for Mind Tickle. I joined Mind Tickle by choice because I had 2 or 3 years in the sales enablement, sales readiness space, and I saw the trend of things moving towards coaching. Mind Tickle has a coaching module within our readiness platform that actually helps to reinforce. So managers being ignored from a lot of the training, $2 billion is spent a year on training, and managers get a fraction of that. So we have the ability to help reinforce the managers, guide them, and also obviously from the conversation intelligence point of view, identify the execution and help the managers with coaching gaps. Obviously, we use our own tools, so that's critical for me. But I think that it's not just about the technology. You can give the best technology to anyone. If they're not trained or that minded, it's going to be a waste of money. So it's a combination of the right culture, the right people, and the right technology, which gets the results.
What about yourself, Matthew? Embarrassing.
So much like Anthony, I think the key thing is we provide our employees with a number of different ways that they can leverage actionable and useful content in the form of online learning, technology that supports it, but fundamentally the key thing that comes to it is the trust. So we leverage our own technology, which is the sales performance management platform, which helps drive the behavior based off of what we desire as an organization. But because it's linked to people's compensation, we can then have frequent discussions about a topic, whether it be an opportunity or whether it be a specific account that's already working with us. And we can leverage that as a touch point for coaching, which then allows us to ingrain different ideas and concepts as we move in different territories. And leveraging all of that together in a way that's trusted but accessible, it has to be accessible, is really key. Brilliant.
And finally, Wendy?
Yes, I will say, you heard me say in my speech earlier that I had never seen Gong product until I joined. Well, I saw it obviously through the interview process, but I will say it is a product. I describe it as once you see it, you can't unsee it. You don't realize how much you're living in the Stone Age if you don't have a revenue intelligence platform to help your reps. Because ultimately, yesterday's technology doesn't match today's challenges. Matthew spoke about the fact that we're in a remote environment. You no longer learn by osmosis. So what Gong does essentially is gives you the full visibility into all of those conversations and actionable insights to be able to coach your reps. And it also, I think, removes conflict, because obviously it's pretty subjective. If a manager happens to jump on a call, coach, it ends up being a bad call. The rep's like, that was just a bad call. That doesn't happen. This sort of takes away any subjectivity, and it's completely objective because it's just based on facts. So I am just the biggest believer in my product, so I'm very happy to be able to sell it. But it is game changing for revenue orgs.
I do wonder how that impacts people now with these revenue intelligence platforms that you can't hide as a sales professional anymore. And I wonder if anyone knows the impact or a study into the impact on confidence levels. I'll be quite interested in that at some point, because it's fascinating that if you think of the traditional salesperson that sometimes, and certainly not at sales confidence, but considered that their success is based on bravado and an art. Now we're really truly being scientific about that approach. If there's any comments, let me know, and then I'll move on to the last question.
Well, I just say quickly, sales reps actually love it. So my first thing when I heard, I was like, sales reps must hate this. But actually, because it makes them so much smarter, they end up earning more money and they end up closing more deals because they can listen to what other reps are doing. So it's like there's an initial hesitancy, and then when they realize what it does, they're like, "Oh my God, this is life-changing."
Yeah.
So yeah.
So go ahead, Matthew.
Well, and as Wendy mentions, people don't want to fail. Like, technology is there as an enabler. So actually, once you get over that concept of big brothers watching you, and you realize that it's actually there as a tool to allow you to succeed more, it changes people's perception, and also it provides them visibility, which then leads to trust. And that, I think Anthony's mentioned it, I think Wendy's mentioned it, trust is key for us. No matter which employee, where you are inside the organization, having trust that your company is trying to help you achieve a goal is something that's key. Sorry, Anthony.
No, that's fine. Yeah, and I second all of that. From my perspective, sales reps who haven't been exposed to it before, when they get their hands on it, and then you try and take it away, it's one of those tools that if you try and take it away once they've actually used it, there will be that they will kick up a fuss. There's not many tools or things that you can say that about with sales. And one of the things that Wendy says, and I fully agree, is that the Europe, UK are way behind the US in adopting this technology. Obviously, there's a reason we're doing it. There's a reason Wendy's arrived with Gone, which I very much welcome. This is going to become it's almost going to be embarrassing for revenue leaders if you don't have this technology. That's what is going to happen. And then for salespeople who don't want to embrace it, they're going to be missing out, and they're going to be surpassed by people who do.
Well, I'm going to wrap up there because we're on time. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise. A recommendation to the audience, make sure you go and connect on LinkedIn with each of our guest speakers, and I'm sure they'll answer questions in the feed. Wendy, it's been wonderful to have you on today, and we can look forward to Matthew speaking later on about the Euros, and also Anthony, stay on the line. We're going to invite Anna up to the stage. Thank you for that discussion, everybody.
Great, thank you.
See you.